What is going on, YouTubeverse? We are back, and in the middle of this episode, we will be at the halfway point of the top 70 albums of the 70s as voted by you guys. It's been brilliant so far, and thank you to my friend Nathaniel here. That has been awesome all the way through, and yeah, this is great, guys. Can't wait to get into it.
Right back at you, man. Here we are, another episode about to be in the books, and I can't wait to talk about some of these records and some of their placements because I'm kind of all over the place on this episode. I'll tell you right now.
Oh boy, can't wait. All right, let's get right into it at number 40. Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin from 1973, the first Zeppelin album on the list, and certainly not the last. And, it's got some absolute classics on here. Of course, the song Remains the Same, which would go on to be the name of the documentary / concert film of that name. The Rain song, which is an absolutely gorgeous ballad that, at 7+ minutes, I love the way it builds. The guitar, the chord changes are so beautiful and lush. Over the Hills and Far Away, also a tremendous ballad that the acoustic guitar riff on this thing is just up there with Stairway as just one of the coolest from Jimmy Page. It's not, I would say all the way through, it's not an overall, like if you're comparing it to Zoso that came out right before it, it's not as strong all the way through, but definitely some other strong points like No Quarter, which features, John Paul Jones on the keys, and Jamaica is kind of ridiculous, but it's kind of fun. The Ocean is a really cool closer, but yeah, great pick, guys. Zeppelin, gotta make it.
Overrated.
I knew that was coming.
Look, I mean, this is the thing about this album, and I think this sums it up perfectly.
Yeah.
You have the Rain song, and then you have the crunge. I
didn't mention the crunch.
it's so inconsistent, and honestly, like, let me tell you, the Rain song is one of my favorite Zeppelin songs. I mean, one of the best opuses, these extended not experiments, but just these really, really well thought out, very, very tasteful ballads.
And those arpeggios, they make you think of Rain when you hear it too. It's just beautiful.
Oh my goodness, the guitar work from Jimmy Page is stellar as always. And I just love the story where George Harrison is saying, oh well, you don't really write any ballads or anything like that, and then they just kind of went on, and he's like, oh, I'm going to show him, and they wrote the Rain song, and I think it's a testament to just how beautiful and how just, I guess, heartfelt that Zeppelin can get from time to time, because you don't always see that. Because, and another thing with Zeppelin, I love Zeppelin, but I also find them to be slightly overrated, just because I just think lyrically, they're not crazy or anything like that. They have some really amazing songs that stand out in that way, but this album basically shows you the same thing, and I appreciate the experimentation, but let me state that again, it is experimentation, because it doesn't always work, and I think this is a perfect example of it. It's got some really great highs, but some really weak points, and I don't know why it's this high on the list at all. I'm really kind of dumbfounded that it's, I wouldn't put it on the list, but
I didn't have it this high on my list either. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even make my top 5 Zeppelin albums, but still, that being said, and Zeppelin, I can't believe you're saying as a band they're overrated.
Well, but, not as a unit, but I mean just their music. I'm just not as big on them as everyone else, but they're obviously so great. I love Zeppelin, and obviously I'm sure we will get into that later.
Yeah, even at their weakest, I think there's still always something to love on here, and as I mentioned, some of the gems that are on here, but definitely not without its weak moments. So, but yeah, what are you gonna do? So, all right. Well, now at number 39.
At Fillmore East by the Allman Brothers Band. Man, I have so much to say about this album, and I know we were just talking about Zeppelin and that hard rock blues, but I tell you, this is probably what I think after At Folsom Prison is the best live album ever created. Really, I think we can both kind of agree it's up there being one of the best. But I tell you, like the first time I heard this, it blew my mind because I knew these songs are going to be like 20 minutes blues songs. But the thing that is so great about the Allman Brothers Band, and why I think the Allman Brothers is probably the greatest blues band of all time, was they were beyond the blues. I mean, just their integration of jazz chords and these really surprising chord progressions. They elevated it to another level that I don't even think a band like the Stones could even dream of. I mean, these musicians, man, I tell you, because look, if we're talking about how great of a guitar album Electric Ladyland is, I think if we're just talking about guitars alone, this might even have a beat. I'm not saying it's better, but just between Duane Allman in one channel and Dickie Betts in the other, you get some of the most insane virtuosic guitar. And these guys are in the same band, and they're both two of my top 5 favorite guitarists of all time.
You can't get any better than that duo, man. That's
oh my
unreal.
Goodness. And dude, and I just love Duane Allman's approach to guitar playing, because he said he played it like a harp. So so basically, like, you listen to what he's doing, it's like, yeah, it does sound like a harmonica player, just the way he has those really tasteful licks and slides. I mean, it's just the greatest slide guitarist of all time, I think, without question. And the way that they just expand these songs out into these just musical explorations, like Stormy Monday, I think is one of the jazziest tunes. It's
Stormy Monday is so awesome. And I love the way he introduces it to this is T-Bone Walker song. Like, it's just
just Greg Allman,
like, just off the cuff. Oh man, the way that song builds is just incredible. And those 7 chords just make it, like, as you said, very jazzy. Just there's not a weak track on here.
No.
I mean, the whole thing, over 20-minute version of Whipping Post. It's,
some say the definitive version,
which that song is just so raw and so great. I know One Way Out ended up on a different album, right? Or is
that was on Eat a Peach.
That's right. Sure. But it's from the same session, from the same concert, and that's actually my favorite Allman Brothers song. I just love that guitar riff so much, and just so fun and upbeat. But this whole thing is just such a great concert experience, and as you said, one of the best blues rock recordings ever made. I mean, Allman Brothers in a live setting, what more can you ask for, man?
I mean, yeah, man. And just the way they expand out songs, like In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, which is a great song on Idlewild South, but dude, it like turns in this Latin infused jazz number in the second half. I'm like, what is this? It's just absolutely nuts how much ground they cover. And sure, maybe I'm not as huge on songs like Hot Lance. That's probably my least favorite, but it's still good. And I think the thing is about this album, though, they don't miss a single note. At all. And they were saying that this was one of their weaker nights. It's like, well, what did they sound like on a good night then? I mean, this is I think that they are probably the tightest band in history. And I think, the greatest live band of all time, with all due respect to the Grateful Dead, or the best jam band of all time, I should say. But I also feel like the best live band too, because the Who were, they had the theatrics, and they were just such a tight unit. I think maybe just on their own accords, being 4 guys. But these guys, it was just unbelievable what they came up with together, just jamming it out, and really gave us some of the most impressive blues music I've ever heard in my entire life. And this is way too low. What is this? I was just talking about Houses of the Holy being too high, but then you got this only at number 39. Come on, guys, this is one of the best albums ever. I would say this should be at least in the top 20.
Well, I'm at 70s, man. It's rough. There's so much great stuff out there. So, what are you gonna do once again?
I guess so.
But yeah, guys, that brings us to number 38. Pink Moon by Nick Drake from 1972. Such a classic record, and such an amazing artist. I'm so glad that he made the list. I actually think this could have been a little higher as well, because it's just, I think it's under 30 minutes long, but, for a folk artist that is literally just him and an acoustic guitar on almost all these songs, maybe with exception of the title track, I think has some piano overdubbed. It is just amazing. I mean, not many other artists can pull off a record with that sparse of an arrangement and still be just, it's hypnotic. I mean, songs like the title track, Place to Be, I think is one of his greatest songs of all time. Just beautiful, and the sentiment behind it. And of course, there's so much melancholy and sadness in his music, as sadly he did not live far beyond this album, and committed suicide. And it's just tragic that we don't have more Nick Drake music. I mean, only 3 albums to his name technically, but songs like Things Behind the Sun, such a dark masterpiece that is, and then closing the album out with From the Morning, I think it's just another one of his most gorgeous ballads. I know I skipped others, but Which Will is another highlight. Road, his guitar playing too, his down tuning that he uses so frequently, just gives it like this huge bassy sound, and then these arpeggios that he's doing are so complex, and I think that's what really keeps it interesting, aside from his just unusual voice. That's such a beautiful instrument on its own. Yeah, I absolutely love this album, and I'm so glad to see it here.
Yeah, Nick Drake is one of those artists that I really enjoy a lot of his stuff, but I've never fully embraced him, and I think part of it is maybe because his lyricism is so cryptic in a sense that it feels kind of unrelatable. Sometimes, obviously, there's a few exceptions on this album, and like Parasite, which might be my favorite Nick Drake song, where he's just being so self-deprecating, which I'm
Mm,
assuming the song is about himself, and it's just so heartbreaking to
yeah.
listen to what he's talking about in this album, especially with knowing what happened to him. And I just find it just so disheartening, because this was like his last album. He was like, I'm not doing anything more, because he wasn't taking off commercially. No one was really listening to him. And also another problem was when he was touring was he wouldn't, like, he'd get on stage, he'd perform a song, and then he'd tune his guitar for 10 minutes and not say a single thing to the audience, because he was very, kind of, he had a lot of anxiety, which
Mhm.
went along with his depression as well. And so no one really wanted to see him, and he didn't really want to perform. So it's just so sad to see, like it took this long, like after his death, to kind of get the recognition he deserved. But I tell you, like, I get, the appeal. And I also think this album's a little too stripped down for me.
Mm.
I just the acoustic and his voice, which are both beautiful, but as you're
Yeah, I
saying about
actually like
him.
Brighter Later more for that reason, like the arrangements on it that John Cale added to that record especially are really magnificent. But didn't mean to cut you off there, but
No,
yeah.
no, no. It's a good note to make.
Yeah.
But I also just think, as you're saying about him as a guitarist, so underrated. Just the way, like, he'll like attack a certain string when he's plucking it, and just
Mm.
be so consistent with it. He has such a unique style, and I've never heard a guitarist quite like him. And I think he utilizes his instrument so well in that sense, especially considering it's just him and the guitar for the most part on here. But yeah, I get this as a classic album. You say it should be higher. I say it should be lower. But hey, I know that it's still really, really solid record, and I respect Nick Drake a lot. And yeah,
Yeah.
so this is a good choice. It would feel not right to, I guess, not have him on the list at all.
Sure, sure. And in many ways, I think he was probably kind of ahead of his time. And of course, as you said, didn't really get his due until many years after his death.
So
But
that car commercial, I guess.
yeah, yeah, car
Yeah.
commercial, Garden State, the movie, several soundtracks actually. But yeah, this is just one of those sad stories that is a gift that keeps on giving, though. So glad it made the list. So now at number 37.
Quadrophenia by The Who. Yeah, this album is an absolute classic, and it certainly was on my list. And I'll tell you, I don't think that this is the best album of all time, as some people claim. And I know some people voted on this list. This is very high on yours, and I'm not taking that away from you. But I think when it comes to The Who, this has some incredible highs and is pretty consistent all the way through. But it is also quite inconsistent at the same time, especially the storytelling, which feels very scattershot. And obviously the story of Jimmy, trying to like figure out who he is, and obviously the quadrophenia, which is like standing in for all the four members of the band. I think it kind of loses itself a little bit, and kind of loses that narrative thread, which makes a lot of these songs really compelling. And honestly, some of Pete Townshend's absolute best, just from the beginning with The Real Me, which is just might even be my favorite on here. Such a great rocker. Can you see the real me, doctor? Just so great. And obviously, if you didn't think Keith Moon was like the greatest drummer of all time, this is like what honestly, this is what drumming in like heaven sounds like, or whatever. He's like the drum god. I swear this is the best performance he's ever given on any record, not specifically the song, but just this album in its totality. I mean, it's just incredible the work he does on here. And really after that, he just fell off with the drugs and everything, so you never really got as refined of a performance again from Keith Moon. But here is just absolutely incredible. And of course, just the way that Pete Townshend kind of like took it back to the roots, and was like, okay, we need to break down the egos. You need to go back to like the mod scene, and kind of like do the self-analysis. It was songs like The Punk and the Godfather, and just the way he uses like other themes from other songs, old Who songs, kind of like.
I love that song, man. That guitar riff is so great.
Oh, so good, man. And I also just love, when like that generating, it's just the synths, and some of the synths do sound a bit dated on here, but there's so many great songs like Cut My Hair, which is one of the ones that has a repeating motif, and just that beautiful Pete Townshend vocal. Why should I care if I have to cut my hair? And just I'm the one is great. Of course, you gotta love 515, which is just an absolute classic Who song. And sometimes I hear it on classic rock radio. I get really excited because like you don't hear it that much. But I'll tell you, there's songs on here I don't really care for, like Drowned and Dr. Jimmy, which I don't really like at all. But I just love songs on the other hand, like Bellboy, which has like a great Keith Moon performance, very performative, very caricaturish, but it's very much so about him, and just kind of like, as I was saying, this concept of this kid who's stuck in the past and really has to grow up and get his head out of his ass, I suppose, and realize that he needs to change and embrace love to actually become a decent person, because he's really not a great character throughout this whole thing, if we're talking about the things he does. But of course, just ending this thing out with Love, Rain or Me, which is just one of their most powerful songs, and just Roger's vocals on it. And let me tell you something, I saw The Who at Madison Square Garden last month, and they did a condensed version of Quadrophenia, and hearing Love, Rain Over Me was honestly a religious experience. And Roger Daltrey at 78 years old is still hitting those notes. And
wow.
Yeah, man, it was just, I was lost in the music, man. It was just incredible. And then of course with the rock, they did the rock, the instrumental before it, and they juxtapose all these events like, Elvis dying and then the Iraq war. It was really weird, the stuff they were including, but for some reason it made it more compelling to me. But yeah, even though this album has its fair share of issues, I just think this has some of the best stuff Pete Townshend ever wrote for the band. And it's an absolute classic concept album, and one that's been very influential over time. So you got to have it at the list. I think it's a decent spot for it, though. I'd probably have a bit lower on mine, but still.
Yeah, I had it lower as well. I mean, if I had to compare this with Tommy, I would say, Tommy is the better concept album and stronger album overall. But where this kind of like, not to compare this with Houses of the Holy, but strong highs and some low lows also. So it's a little inconsistent overall, but yeah, some of the stuff on here is just all the ones that you mentioned. They totally knock it out of the park, and the production on this is so good as well. And Love Reign Over Me especially is just like, when those strings kick in, and then at the end when he's just screaming at the top of his lungs, it's so great, man.
Man. And
So
also just the motifs are still strong as ever, supposed to that zoot suit, one
yeah,
jacket with sideburns 5 inches long. They're
yeah.
instantly catchy and instantly memorable. So I still think that there's so much to admire about this record. I just
Oh
don't
yeah.
think it comes together for me as fully as it does for a lot of people. But obviously, it's one of the best albums from the '70s. And
Mhm.
another one I can't believe they removed off the new Rolling Stone list, because I don't know who listens to this and
Oh
says
God.
it's not
Yeah.
in the 500 greatest albums of all time, but that's another conversation.
Yeah, that's insane. But well, anyway, well, now at number 36, Led Zeppelin 3 from 1970. We got two Zeppelins in one episode. This is fantastic, guys. And yeah, this is a great one, coming in strong with Immigrant Song, one of their best rockers, going straight into Friends, which is just such a cool, kind of mysterious, and strange song, actually, when you think of it. But I just love the way they mix this kind of off kilter acoustic riff with this really cool thing that Page is doing. It feels very Middle Eastern, which of course they would embellish when Page and Plant reunited in the '90s with the Egyptian band, and then this album's kind of all over the place, with electric more on side A, more of the acoustic stuff on side B. But Since I've Been Loving You, just one of not just one of the greatest Zeppelin songs, one of the greatest blues rock songs of all time. Just incredible. Everyone on top of their game on this one, but Robert Plant's vocals especially are just so intense. The way he tells the story, working from 7 to 11 every night, and it's just got you invested from the get-go. Just for this song alone, it deserves to be this high on the list. But then you've got on side B, traditional songs like Gallows Pole. You've got Tangerine, which is a really beautiful ballad. That's the Way as well. And Bronyar Stomp is just such a fun, upbeat, acoustic stomp of a song that I think is just really underrated. But I know you're going to say this album is overrated, but
Yeah.
it's all good.
It's I like this more than Houses of the Holy. I'm not sure, but I would just listen to this album, and yeah, I don't get it fully, what the much enamored love for it. I think Immigrant Song is obviously such a strong opener, and obviously the most iconic song on this album, no question. And Since I've Been Loving You, I wouldn't say it's the best blues song of all time, but it's such a powerful performance from the entire band. And it's a bit of a slow burn, but it really, once you just listen to Roger Plant lay into those vocals, and just that really cool guitar line from Jimmy Page, it's just absolutely
Oh,
fantastic.
and Page's guitar solo too is just
Mhm.
incredible on that track.
Oh, absolutely, man. Really
Yeah.
one of the standouts on this record for sure. And I also
Mhm.
love their adaptation of Gallows Pole. I mean, just the way they build up. First, it just starts with Robert Plant's voice, and then you add obviously John Bonham on the drums, and then Jimmy Page playing the banjo, and then the way it just speeds up.
Mhm.
It's just such a cool song, and a very country influenced song, which you don't really hear from Zeppelin. And I understand that this was a very transitionary album, because you had experiments with country, and of course with like ballads like Tangerine, which I've never really fully understand the love for. I don't know. It doesn't really do much for me. And I think the other thing, as I was saying about the lyrics, it's
Mhm.
Zeppelin. It's whatever. But I think that there's some stuff on here I think is I think this album is pretty inconsistent too. Like Out on the Tiles, I wouldn't say it's a turd. I think it's a bit of a clunker though, in the
Mhm.
sense that it is pretty clunky. I mean, especially that riff in the middle is kind of terrible, but not a terrible song or anything like that. And that's the way I think is just kind of a boring, repetitive blues number, and that's why I just don't fully understand the appeal of this, because I think they've done so much better. But I do think the stuff that really does work on here is really cool, and showed where they were going into a Zeppelin 4 with the making of that album, and kind of bringing some of that stuff over that I think that they would later perfect on that record.
Yeah, oh, I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
And you know, in 1970, I believe they didn't get very good reviews for this album at the time. And I think they probably, some of their fan base was kind of like, you know, what's up with all this acoustic stuff, guys? You know, they were used to them just rocking out on their first two records. So like you said, it is a transitional album, and I think you know, their next one obviously was better in almost every way. But I love that they always have that, the roots of the blues behind them, and that's why again, I have to go back to Since I've Been Loving You. I mean, it's just
Right.
incredible. But you feel that sense of urgency even on songs like Gallows Pole, that
Yeah.
are just these old traditional songs, but they give them that Zeppelin boost. And you know, this was an album that I didn't even appreciate that as much until many years later, and I heard some of these different versions in the 90s, and I was like, those, I need to go back to that album again and re-listen. And it's become now one of my faves, not in my top three, but up there.
Right.
So,
It's just, but I mean, a better blues album than at Fillmore East. I don't
oh
know. I
no,
just
no, I wouldn't say that. Like overall,
man, it's not even a contest, I think. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Or
I know
above
what you're saying.
Quadrophenia. I don't know. I get people love this, but I wouldn't have put it on the list, and honestly I'd probably put it lower. But hey, that's cool, man, that you come back around and appreciated it. I basically feel the same way as the first time I listened, but it's a good album. You know, I like it. There's a lot of great stuff on it.
Well, good deal, man. So
Yeah.
now at number 35.
Asia by Steely Dan. Yeah, you know, this is one of those albums, like I was saying, with something like Blonde on Blonde and the 60s list. It's an album I think is great. I don't fully love it, but it's undeniably a classic. And I think the production on here is just some of the best production you ever hear in your life. I mean, just the refined nature of these recordings that Donald Fagen and Walter Becker orchestrated is just amazing. The really pure audiophile quality to its maximalist extent. But of course, I mean, just the opening this thing up with Black Cow, which is one of my favorite Steely Dan songs, just so funky, so groovy with this great jazz melody. Just absolute classic. The title track is great too, you know, a bit of an extended instrumental with obviously lyrics on it, but the instrumental part is really what you kind of sink your teeth into in that song. And then Deacon Blues, which I think a lot of people would say is the best Steely Dan song. And I do think I like some of the stuff on Can't Buy a Thrill a bit more, as I've already spoken about in the series. But man, what an amazing song. And, you know, just that, and die behind the wheel, you know, just that whole chorus, you know, it's just amazing. And it feels like, honestly, maybe more of a personal song for Donald Fagen, because I never felt like Steely Dan was a personal sort of band. They were kind of alienating with their cryptic lyrics sometimes. Peg is amazing, of course, with Michael McDonald on background vocals. You can't mistake it for anybody else. It's just such a great tune, absolutely fantastic. And I don't know, I just think for me it really kind of, not any of the songs are bad at the end, but I just feel like they don't match up to the rest of it. And I just feel like the structure of this album's a little weird, but then at the same time, I'm like, I don't know what I would do to change it. So it's just, I'm very kind of like stuck in limbo with this album, but I certainly understand why everybody loves it to the extent that they do, because it's undeniably great. And I just think, as I'm going to say again, the musicianship on here is just incredible.
Yeah, great musicianship, great production. As you said, I'm Steely Dan is just not one of those bands that really I connect with. I'm sure I said this
Yeah.
already with Can't Buy a Thrill, but I actually like Can't Buy a Thrill more as an album
Agreed.
as well. And I think this is a little high on the list, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not bad by any means. It's just not wasn't on my list. Uh, don't I wouldn't go as far as to say it's overrated, but a little high on this particular list in my opinion. But yeah, it's cool.
I think we can meet halfway on that, especially after the Zeppelin conversation. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I wouldn't have
Yeah,
it on
you
my
owe me
list.
one, man.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, I wouldn't have it on my list, but I certainly feel like it would. This list would be weird if it didn't have it on there because it is
Yeah,
such an
so many
important
people love
album.
it. Yeah.
Right, and it's just for when it comes to like production quality. I mean, this is such an important album and influential in that sense, and really defined the intellectual dad rock of the 1970s. So there
Yeah.
you go. You got the Steely Dan fans. You got both Can't Buy a Thrill in Asia on here. So
Yeah.
great
Hey,
choices.
gotta be happy, Steely Dan guys. So now at number 34.
Transformer by Lou Reed.
Yeah.
Why? Why is it this low though? This is one of the greatest albums of all time. You're telling me that is this low on the list? No, I can't buy into that, guys, because this is like top 20 albums of all time for me. I think Lou Reed is one of the greatest singer-songwriters of all time. One of my favorite artists. I'd probably say top 5 artists. And as you know, I've talked about the Velvet Underground. We've already talked about Berlin. But honestly, this is his best record. And I think most people would agree with me. I mean, just
Hmm.
from the beginning with songs like Vicious, which is so much fun, has a killer guitar riff. And of course, the surrealist song in his tribute to his mentor, Andy Warhol, with Andy's Chest, which has so many great lines, like, like her nose went down to her feet. And then when people said that they smelled her feet, they meant her nose. It's like really bizarre images and lyrics on here, but somehow
Right.
is a song about the assassination attempt on Andy Warhol. But it's just so great. And of course, you have great bangers, glam rock bangers like Hanging Around, which yet again just shows his very macabre sense of humor on here. And like, she had sex in all the halls and she painted all her toes, or whatever he's saying. It's just
Hmm.
such a funny song, and the great lines like, in the 18 teen man who doesn't mean you well. It's like, it's
Yeah.
just so great, such a fun song. And of course, I mean, obviously you have to talk about the two absolute iconic classics on here being Perfect Day, which is maybe the most personal and heartbreaking ballad Lou Reed has ever written, about kind of like him just admiring this person so much, and they're just so beautiful to him, but yet he feels like he is just so unworthy of this love. Maybe it's because of a past addiction, or maybe just something terrible he's done in his life, but for some reason he feels so unworthy. And it's such a, I mean, it's really one of those songs that just makes you want to fall in love, but also makes you feel bad at the same time for this guy. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
incredible song. And of course, the biggest hit of his entire career, the one that really broke him out, which is Walk on the Wild Side, which is such a definitive statement for Lou Reed, and shows you that everybody is full of shit when they're talking about, gays and trans rights, especially at that time. This was a #1 hit, because I mean, that's basically what this is about. And such a groundbreaking song, because yet again, Lou Reed, such a trailblazer when it comes to these topics and just talking about these cross dressers, and obviously so many great lines, like, you know, uh, Candy, talking about Candy Darling, in the back room, she was everybody's
Hmm.
darling, just the
Yeah.
way he says in that chorus, and all the colored girls go do 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 do, and then you hear the
Yeah.
background vocals come in, and also one of the best walking bass lines that A Tribe Called Quest would later sample on Can I Kick It, but it's certainly
Hmm.
not better than this. And then yet again, songs like Make Up, and where he's like saying we're coming out of our closets and out on the streets. It's not, I mean, he doesn't really leave much to the imagination of what he's talking about. And then of
Right.
course, I mean, the list doesn't even end there. Satellite of Love, one of the best glam rock songs. And of course, having David Bowie on vocals makes it even better. The fact that Bowie, who was influenced by Lou Reed, then helped him produce this album, and of course brought Mick Ronson on to play guitar, and it shows. And it just, man, what a classic song. And all these songs, man.
Yeah, Bowie's production is great too, man.
Yeah.
And yeah, even I mean, there's not a weak song on here. New York Telephone Conversation.
It's
So weird, but it's so great. And I love the closer. Good night, lady.
You get like, you could just picture Lou Reed on a stage dressed in drag, like singing the song. And it just, there's one, he delivers one line, goes, ha, or whatever he does. And it just kills me because his sardonic sense of wit comes out in every single second of that song. And it's so campy, but in the best way possible.
And it's so great the way like his humor comes out in just the weirdest places. And sometimes, you know, in some songs it's like so heartfelt as well, and he just really rides that line. But Perfect Day, man. I know you went on about that already, but just that ending with you're going to reap just what you sow. It's just one of the coolest endings of any song ever. And the orchestration, just everything about that song is amazing. And of course, Walk on the Wild Side. Just totally iconic. And it's you've convinced me. It probably should be higher on the list. I mean, this
34 guys, come on. This is one of the greatest albums ever made. And what a great sophomore record for him. I mean, this was really, I think, maybe the best sophomore album of all time.
Wow. That's saying something, man. Yeah. But only at 34. Crazy. But
man.
Well, well, now at number 33.
Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs by Derek and the Dominoes. Of course, the short-lived group with this debut album and their only album. But really, this is Eric Clapton's show, and I think easily the greatest achievement of Eric Clapton's career. I mean, yet again, one of the best guitar albums, I think, up there with what I was saying with Electric Ladyland at Fillmore East. I mean, just, I can't even count how many guitar overdubs are on this thing, but just kicking it off right from the beginning, you hear so many on I Looked Away, which is such an amazing over with that riff. Boom, 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 boom. I mean, just immediately gets stuck in your head. And just Eric Clapton's guitar work on the song, oh my goodness, still blows my mind. And then, of course, I mean, really, this A-side is just absolutely nutty good. I mean, especially with Bell Bottom Blues, which might even be the best song on here. I don't know. But just, oh my goodness, just that everyone knows, do you want to see me crawl across the floor to you? And you just hear him going crazy. Do you want to hear me beg you to take me back?
And those background vocals are so good. Yeah.
Oh, from Bobby Woodrock. And yeah, man. And this is the thing, because we were talking about Clapton as a vocalist when it came to Cream. I think this is like some of the best vocals he's ever done, because it's so impassioned. Because obviously we know this album is just this probably might have the most interesting story behind any album about how he fell in love with Patty Boyd, obviously George Harrison's wife at the time, and how this was kind of like his plea for unrequited love, which was eventually fulfilled later on. But obviously it just comes out, like, even in covers like Have You Ever Loved a Woman, where he's even says it's like, I'm in love with my best friend's woman. You know, it's just, he's not hiding it all, he's bearing his soul. But I mean, just the guitar work on here, especially bringing on, once again, Dwayne Allman. I think you might be seeing a trend here in these albums I'm enjoying. But man, just him on the slide and Clapton doing all this stuff. So many great songs. Keep On Growing is another one on the A side, which is just incredible. Of course, his cover of Nobody Knows When You're Down and Out. Key to the Highway.
Classic blues tune, yeah.
Oh, and just the solo that he does like near the end of that song is just so absolutely mind-blowing.
Even his cover of Little Wing, man, is up there. It's not quite as good as Stevie Ray Vaughan's version, in my opinion, but really cool take on it.
Well, I don't know. I think that's where this album falters a little bit for me, is the covers of Little Wing and It's Too Late, because obviously you can't match up to Hendrix. It
Well,
just
yeah.
and it just goes on for a little too long. And as much as I say, Hendrix version of Little Wing should be longer, I certainly think it's a lot better and more explorative than this one,
Yeah.
surprisingly enough. And obviously, I think Otis Redding's cover of It's Too Late is great, which is obviously sampled on Late Registration. But I
Mhm.
don't know, man. I could listen to these guys play guitars for all day, like, and I would not
Yeah.
get sick of it. I just think that really there's some inconsistencies, but man, it's just listening to this is so strong. And of course, Layla, the
Mhm.
penultimate track on this album, the title track, is probably my favorite song. I don't know, it goes between that and Bell Bottom Blues, but just
Yeah, those two are the best for sure.
right. And his ultimate statement to Patty Boyd, obviously. And then, of course, that beautiful piano outro that always makes me think of that pink Cadillac and Goodfellas, but
Yes,
just
of course.
composed by Jim Gordon, who, I mean, killed his mom. So that's kind of weird that something so beautiful could come from something so devilish.
Mm.
But even so, I mean, one of the greatest classic rock songs of all time, and ending with Thorn Tree in the Garden too, that Bobby Whitrock song, so beautiful and still stays within the thematic realms of this unrequited love and just that kind of longing for connection that Eric Clapton was looking for at the time. This is an absolute classic, and one I think should be definitely higher on the list, at least in the top 25.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is an absolute classic, man. And yeah, just for those two tracks alone, Layla and Bell Bottom Blues, are just both incredible. And yeah, with him soloing with Dwayne Allman at the same time at the end over that piano, it is just spectacular. And yeah, great pick, guys. So now at number 32, Paranoid by Black Sabbath from 1970. Such a classic hard rock album. Some would call it a metal album, but hey, whatever it is, it's fantastic with some of their most well known songs. The title track, of course. War Pigs, one of my very favorites, just an epic opener of a song. And, talking about essentially railing against the war in Vietnam and how nonsensical it is, and that these war pigs are just after power. And I love how they kind of get their due at the end of the song. But then you've also got Planet Caravan, which is very quiet and understated but beautiful. And you can't say enough. Tony Iommi's guitar work throughout this record is just incredible, on par with the likes of Jimmy Page. And some of these riffs, especially like Iron Man,
Oh,
one of the
so
most infamous guitar riffs of all time. And really cool how, yeah, it's known for that main riff and like the crazy lyrics that make no sense, but there's so many different passages of the music on that song that are all incredible. And I even love side B, like Hand of Doom, is a really
oh,
cool kind of funky almost track. The drumming on there, especially by Bill Ward, is really cool. And of course Rat Salad, the instrumental where he goes off a bit more. But yeah, just I think it's Sabbath's best album, and probably a good spot for it on the list.
yeah, I agree with you. And this tells you something, because I think this was like 71 and it just missed out on my list. But what does that tell you about
Yeah.
how great this decade was and this album, man? I agree with like everything you said, especially War Pigs. And of course, Ozzy Osbourne's vocals on here, just so iconic.
Yeah.
Like the witches at Black
That's
Masses,
yeah.
oh Lord, and he just starts going off, man. And
Yeah.
what a great anti-war song. And of course, the title track is so iconic too. You got to mention that.
Hmm.
Just so many classic hooks. Like you were saying, there's so many in Iron Man just alone, which is maybe their most iconic song. That down, 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 I mean, just incredible. And of course, honestly, I'm so glad you mentioned Hand of Doom, because that's actually my favorite song on this album. Just
Hmm.
talking about like Vietnam vets coming back and like sticking needles into their arms, and just the way he describes what happens in the aftermath. It's so
Mhm.
grotesque. It just makes me squirm even listening to the song. And I think that goes to the inherent power of the lyricism, because people forget, like, Black Sabbath had some really great lyrics. They really got into some heavy material, and I mean, I guess sonically and lyrically, and I just don't think they get enough credit in that sense. And I think it drops off just a little bit, but I mean, just those first few songs, and Planet Caravan too is just
Mhm.
so cool and so different musically from everything else on the album. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I can't believe this wasn't on my list. I'm really kind of like
It
shocked
wasn't
I
on
didn't.
mine either, actually.
Right.
I can't believe it. But like you said, that just goes to show how great the '70s were, man. And they had, I mean, several awesome albums. That obviously, I think this is the only Sabbath album to make our top 70 here. But again, that just shows you the quality of the decade.
Right.
Incredible.
Do I think it's better than like Layla or Transformer or a lot of the albums I've talked about on this episode very positively? No, but obviously it has that iconic stance, and of course that trippy album cover, which is just iconic in its own right. You gotta
Yeah.
love this album. I just fantastic record. So I'm glad to see it make the list.
Oh, absolutely. So now at number 31,
Cosmo's Factory by Credence Clearwater Revival. Yeah, you knew. I mean, obviously, we had Green River and Willie and the Poor Boys on the 60s list. You knew this was coming. And this is what I think is their best album, unquestionably, and really plays like a greatest hits album. I mean, obviously, Ramble Tamble isn't a greatest hit, but just that extended instrumental. I mean, it just such a grooving and rocking tune, and just the way it goes off on that instrumental passage, and just the paranoia and John Fogerty's lyrics, he's like screaming, "Mortgage on my life, mortgage on my life." It's
yeah.
just so much fun to listen to. But I mean, just look at all these songs. Traveling Band, Looking Out My Back Door, which is probably my favorite, that Buck Owens influenced song, just
Mhm.
so catchy, just undeniable. It just puts a smile on your face every time you hear it. And of
Yeah.
course, not my favorite, but Run Through the Jungle is obviously has that iconic riff and a lawsuit to go along with it, I think.
Yeah.
Up around the bend, obviously that it was like the first time I heard
Really
this, I
cool
was like,
riff.
oh my goodness, I know so many of these songs. And
Yeah.
of course, Who Will Stop the Rain is another one. And of course, they're like 11-minute long version of I Heard It Through the Grapevine, which I think goes on a little bit too long. But really, I mean,
I love that version actually. Like
I do too, but
his guitar solo on there, which is very long, as you said.
yeah.
I just love it, man. I love Fogerty's playing. Like, I think he's such an underrated guitarist.
Oh yeah,
Um,
100%.
and this really proves it, that track. And of course his vocals, like nobody sounds like this
No.
guy. But Long as I Can See the Light is possibly my favorite Creedence song. I
And I
just
wouldn't
think
blame you for that at
uh
all.
what a great closer to this album.
You
And
could have closed it any other way, really.
yeah, such a powerful ballad. The lyrics are just are wonderful, so hopeful and just full of urgency. It's yeah, such a great
Right.
track.
And maybe his best vocal performance on any record. When he's
Yeah,
like, "I won't,"
yeah,
it's just there's so much power in what he's saying. It's like he
very
truly,
soulful too.
yeah,
Yeah,
he truly believes in the song, and just saying, put a candle, and just the way he does, put a candle in the window,
no, yeah,
like
yeah.
that little, it's so
And then at
amazing.
the end when he's like, yeah,
Yeah,
over and
man.
over again,
Oh
it's so
my
great,
goodness. And
dude.
dude, just other
Yeah,
great songs like the his Bo Diddley cover of Before You Accuse Me is really great.
yeah.
And of course, I mean, there's so many on here. I then think like Arthur Crudup covers like My Baby Let Me is okay, but I tell
Mhm.
you, I mean, this is their strongest record, I think, from top to bottom. It's just absolutely fantastic. Got a lot of great musical diversity on there too, within
Mhm.
that country swamp rock sound. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can't love this album. And honestly, I think that
Mhm.
this is like at a perfect spot.
Yeah.
I really, this is around where I had it on my list, and I just think it's an absolute classic from the 70s.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And I hate to say it, but typically like when I reach for Credence, I just go to Chronicle because it's got
Yeah,
like
yeah,
all the hits in one spot for the most part.
right.
But yeah, as far as their individual albums goes, this is it's hard to argue this is the strongest. So um
Actually, I was just going to say real quick, I actually prefer listening to this over Chronicle.
nice.
So but I get it. I get the whole argument there for sure. That's my
Oh
second
yeah.
favorite release, but yeah.
Such a great band, such a great album. And guys, we are now more than halfway through the list. I can't
Already.
believe we're already this far. So great choices so far. I mean, it's been a wild ride. Like some of I didn't know exactly where we were going to go, but I feel like aside from a few little quibbles here and there, this has been extremely strong, and yeah, the democracy is working well here
I
between
guess so.
everyone watching.
Could be
So
better in some areas, but hey, that's just the luck of the draw, I
more
guess.
Zeppelin, baby.
We'll see about that.
All right. Well, we will see you next week. Be sure to subscribe to both of our channels. Of course, next week, the episode will be posted on Nathaniel's channel, and be sure to check out all his other stuff. He's going to be having a lot of really cool stuff about movies and maybe a TV series as well in the near future. So be sure to check all that out. And guys, thanks so much for watching.
Thank you.
We will see you then. Peace.
You're going to reap just what you sow.